Before we start, if you're enjoying these explorations of workplace safety, please take a moment to like and subscribe to the show.
Yeah,
It helps us get to a wider audience.
definitely.
Now, on to a topic that's causing quite a stir in Congress right now.
Okay.
A bill that could potentially eliminate OSHA,
Interesting.
the Occupational Safety and Health Administration.
Wow.
We'll explore the agency's history and its impact and delve into the debate surrounding its potential abolishment.
OSHA's been around for, what, like 5 decades?
Yeah, more than that.
Yeah, over 5 decades, a cornerstone of workplace safety here in the U.S., and it all goes back to 1971, right on the heels of the Occupational Safety and Health Act of 1970.
I see.
Yeah.
So why was there a need for this agency in the first place?
Well, back in the 1960s,
Right.
workplace fatalities and injuries were a pretty common occurrence.
Really?
You had something like 38 workers dying on the job every single day.
Oh, my God.
It's a pretty grim reality.
Yeah.
And it underscored a need for some nationwide safety standards. And of course, enforcement of those standards.
Right.
So Congress recognized the severity of the situation.
Yeah.
And they took action by creating OSHA.
Right.
And they gave OSHA the mandate to establish and enforce these standards
Okay.
across a really, really wide range of industries.
So OSHA became like this national watchdog for worker safety.
You could say that, yeah. They were tasked with overseeing the safety of a huge workforce.
Yeah.
We're talking about 130 million workers.
Wow.
Spread across something like 8 million work sites.
That's a lot.
Yeah, a massive responsibility.
A huge undertaking. And now we have this new bill,
Right.
this NOSHA Act, that wants to dismantle this agency.
That's right. The NOSHA Act stands for Nullify Occupational Safety and Health Administration Act.
Oh, okay.
Catchy, isn't it?
Yeah.
So it was introduced by Representative Andy Biggs of Arizona back in January of this year.
Okay.
The primary goal is to repeal the Occupational Safety and Health Act of 1970,
Okay.
essentially shutting down OSHA.
So we've got some historical background.
Yeah.
But the question is, has OSHA actually been effective over the past 5 decades?
Well, let's look at the data.
Okay.
Before OSHA, as I mentioned, around 38 workers were dying on the job every day.
Right.
By 2023, that number had dropped to 15 a day.
That's still a lot.
It is, but it's a significant decrease.
Yeah.
There's also been a decline in workplace injuries and illnesses
Okay.
from 10.9 incidents per 100 workers in 1972 down to 2.4 per 100 in 2023.
So it seems like OSHA has had a positive impact on workplace safety.
It appears so. But we have to remember there are a lot of factors at play here. While the numbers do show improvement, attributing the entire decline solely to OSHA
Right.
would be an oversimplification.
Yeah.
Things like technological advancements and changes in the nature of work
Right.
have definitely contributed to improving workplace safety over the years.
So there's room for debate about the extent to which OSHA is directly responsible. Let's talk about the arguments for and against eliminating OSHA.
Sure.
Why do some people believe it's no longer necessary?
Well, those who support the NOSHA Act, the folks who want to see OSHA go, often say that the regulations are just too complex.
Okay.
They create a significant burden for businesses.
Interesting.
They argue that these regulations actually stifle business growth
Okay.
and make it harder to create jobs.
So their view is that OSHA is hindering economic progress.
You could say that their perspective is that businesses are the real experts when it comes to their own operations.
Okay.
And so they're better positioned to figure out their own safety procedures
Right.
without the government stepping in.
So they advocate for a more hands-off approach.
Yes,
Trusting businesses to prioritize their employees' safety.
that's the idea.
Okay, so that's the perspective that emphasizes individual responsibility
Right.
and less government involvement.
Yeah.
Now let's look at the other side of the coin.
Okay.
What are the arguments for keeping OSHA?
Well, the folks who want to keep OSHA around,
Right.
they believe that the agency has played a crucial role
Yeah.
in making work environments safer.
Okay.
And they say it's prevented a lot of workplace tragedies. They point to the decline in fatalities and injuries
Right.
as evidence of its effectiveness, and they believe that OSHA needs to still in place
Okay.
to maintain those safety standards.
So then the evidence speaks for itself.
Yes, they believe OSHA has a proven track record
Okay.
and that it's created a level playing field for all businesses,
Right.
preventing companies from cutting corners on safety
Interesting.
just to get ahead of the competition. They also highlight OSHA's enforcement mechanisms,
Okay.
particularly fines, as a way of ensuring accountability
Right.
and incentivizing companies to prioritize worker safety.
They see OSHA as a necessary safeguard to protect workers,
Exactly.
making sure safety isn't sacrificed for profit.
Right.
What about the argument that states could handle workplace safety better?
Well, OSHA supporters, yeah.
They worry about whether states would actually keep up the same safety standards. They're concerned that a shift to state-level regulation
Right.
could lead to a patchwork of inconsistent standards across the country,
Okay.
potentially undermining the whole idea of protecting workers
I see.
and creating uniform safety guidelines.
So they see a strong national standard as crucial for worker protection across all states.
Precisely. And they also point out that OSHA's focus on prevention can actually save businesses money over time.
How so?
Well, the cost of workplace injuries and illnesses is huge,
Yeah.
estimated at $170 billion annually.
Wow.
OSHA advocates say that the agency's proactive approach to safety helps to minimize these costs by preventing accidents from happening in the first place.
So investing in safety up front can actually save money in the long run.
Exactly. It's about reducing the likelihood of those costly accidents and injuries.
That makes a lot of sense.
Right.
It seems like both sides of this debate have strong arguments.
And it really comes down to a difference in perspective on the role of government and the balance between economic considerations and worker safety.
You've summed it up perfectly. It's a complex issue with no easy answers.
Right.
And it reflects these broader societal debates we have about the right level of government regulation, the responsibility of businesses, and the rights of workers.
Right. So we've been looking at the arguments for and against keeping OSHA, but it seems like public opinion might also be a factor here.
Yeah, public sentiment leans pretty heavily in favor of workplace safety regulations.
Oh, really?
Polls consistently show that most Americans want the government involved in protecting workers.
Okay.
For example, a 2024 poll found that 9 out of 10 voters supported OSHA's proposal for a rule to protect workers from extreme heat.
So that's a strong indication that people really value an agency like OSHA.
Absolutely. It suggests that for a lot of people, ensuring safe workplaces isn't just about policy, it's about principle.
We've mainly been focusing on the U.S. perspective.
Right.
Maybe we should broaden our view a little.
Sure.
What do other developed countries do about workplace safety?
Well, looking at the global picture offers some interesting insights.
Okay.
Many developed countries with strong workplace safety rules, often overseen by dedicated agencies, tend to have fewer workplace injuries and fatalities.
So it seems like having an agency like OSHA might actually be correlated with better outcomes for workers.
The data does seem to suggest that the European Union, for instance, has the European Agency for Safety and Health at Work, which plays a major role in setting and enforcing safety standards across all the member countries. And their regulations often emphasize a proactive approach to risk assessment. They even require employers to consult with their employees on safety matters.
That sounds like a more collaborative approach.
Exactly.
Involving both the employers and the worker.
Right, and it appears to be pretty effective. Their model has led to noticeable reductions in workplace accidents and deaths.
So a top-down approach with clear national standards and active enforcement can work.
It seems so.
So the U.S. wouldn't be unusual in having a dedicated agency for workplace safety.
Not at all. In fact, it looks like we'd be following a model that many other developed countries have adopted.
It makes you think if getting rid of OSHA would put the U.S. on a different path.
Yeah, it's an interesting point.
When it comes to worker safety, okay, so we've got the historical context, we've looked at some data, we've even looked at the global perspective.
Right.
But this whole debate about OSHA's future is tied up with politics, isn't it?
It definitely is.
It seems like opinions often fall along party lines.
They do.
With Republicans typically being more skeptical of the agency.
Right.
And Democrats generally more supportive.
Yeah. What's at the heart of this political divide?
Well, you're right.
This issue often gets seen through a partisan lens. A lot of Republicans view OSHA as an example of government overreach. They believe that market forces, not government intervention, are the best way to regulate workplace safety.
So for them, it's about limiting government's role in business.
Exactly. They argue that businesses, not bureaucrats, know best when it comes to their own safety needs.
Okay.
And they often say they're worried about OSHA's regulations being too burdensome, that they stifle business growth and hinder innovation.
So from their perspective, the concern is that OSHA creates unnecessary red tape.
Yeah, and that hurts economic progress.
Okay.
They believe that businesses are naturally going to want to prioritize safety because it's in their best interest to keep their workers happy and attract good employees.
And on the other side, Democrats tend to have a very different view of OSHA, don't they?
They do. Democrats generally see OSHA as a vital protector of workers' rights and safety. They argue that the agency is essential for making sure there's a level playing field for businesses.
Okay.
So that companies don't just cut corners on safety to try to get ahead.
So for them, it's about workers having a voice.
Yeah, and making sure they're not exploited just to make a profit.
Right.
They often point back to the time before OSHA, when workplace accidents and deaths were far more common, as evidence that strong regulations are needed to stop us from going back to those dangerous conditions.
I see.
They believe that workers need the protection of a strong agency like OSHA to counter the power of corporations and make sure their safety isn't compromised.
So for Democrats, this is about social justice.
Yeah.
It's about protecting people who may not have the power to protect themselves at work.
Exactly. And they often point to data. Showing that workers in industries with a history of weak union representation or lots of low wage or immigrant workers tend to benefit most from OSHA's protection.
This really highlights how the debate about OSHA is about more than just regulations. It gets into fundamental questions about values and priorities.
It does.
It's a microcosm of these bigger societal debates we see in American politics.
You're right.
Like the role of government, individual liberty versus collective responsibility. The balance of power between corporations and workers.
You've hit the nail on the head. This debate about OSHA's future is not happening in a vacuum. It's a reflection of those deeper ideological differences that are present in many parts of American society. And it really emphasizes how important it is to understand not just the facts and figures, but also the underlying values and perspectives that influence how people view this issue.
It shows how even when people have the same information, they can reach different conclusions. Depending on their beliefs about the role of government, the power of the market, the responsibility of businesses to their employees.
Absolutely, and it makes it clear how difficult it can be to find common ground on issues like this, where people have very strong beliefs and values.
It's fascinating to see how these big philosophical debates play out in a practical policy issue like workplace safety.
It really is, and it shows why informed civic engagement is so crucial. The decisions made about OSHA will have very real effects on people. So it's important for everyone to understand the different viewpoints and make their voices heard.
Yeah, it's a reminder that these policy decisions aren't just theoretical.
Not all.
They have real consequences that affect everyone's daily lives.
That's right. And it shows how important it is to stay informed, to really think about these issues, and to participate in the political process. These decisions ultimately affect us all. And we need to play a role in shaping the policies that will determine the future of workplace safety in this country.
We've really dug into the different sides of this argument. But it seems like one of the big sticking points is the potential economic buyout of getting rid of OSHA.
It is a big one, for sure.
Some folks say it would boost the economy, while others are worried it could actually end up costing businesses more.
That's a key point.
So what are your thoughts on this?
Well, the folks who want to do away with OSHA, they often say it would free businesses from all these regulations they see as a burden and costing them money. And that this would lead to more investment, more jobs, and just better economic growth overall.
So the idea is that less regulation equals a more booming economy.
That's the basic argument from those who support the NOSHA Act.
The NOSHA Act,
But there's a counter-argument that often gets missed.
What's that?
The idea that the costs tied to workplace accidents and illnesses could actually increase if OSHA is gone.
Interesting.
Which could cancel out any economic gains from getting rid of regulations.
So it's not just a simple get rid of OSHA and the economy takes off kind of thing.
No, it's more complicated than that.
There could be some hidden costs involved.
Exactly. Remember, we're talking about an estimated $170 billion that businesses are shelling out every year for costs related to workplace injuries and illnesses.
That's a lot.
It is. And OSHA supporters argue that the agency's preventive measures are helping to keep those costs in check.
I see.
They're concerned that getting rid of OSHA could make workplaces less safe. leading to more accidents, more injuries, and in the end, higher costs for businesses.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's like the saying, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure.
That's a good way to put it.
Spending money on safety measures up front
Right.
could save businesses from much bigger expenses later on
Exactly.
if there are accidents and injuries.
And it's not just about the direct costs.
Like medical bills and workers' comp.
Right, there are indirect costs too.
Like what?
Things like lost productivity,
Oh, yeah.
having to find and train new workers,
Okay.
potential increases in insurance premiums and legal liabilities.
Right.
All of those things can impact a company's bottom line.
Definitely if safety standards go down.
Exactly.
So it sounds like the possible economic benefits of getting rid of OSHA might not be as great as they seem when you factor in the potential costs of less workplace safety.
It's a much more nuanced issue than it appears on the surface.
It really is.
The economic impact of this decision is complicated with a lot of different factors to consider.
Okay.
It's not as simple as saying deregulation automatically leads to a stronger economy.
Right. You have to look at both the pros and the cons
Exactly.
before deciding whether getting rid of OSHA is a good idea.
Absolutely.
Okay, so we've talked about the economics.
Yeah.
But let's focus on what's probably the most important part of this whole debate.
What's that?
The impact on the safety and well-being of American workers.
Right.
If OSHA is abolished, what could that mean for workers, especially those in high-risk industries?
This is where the potential consequences become really serious. Without OSHA setting and enforcing safety standards nationwide, the responsibility for protecting workers would likely fall on individual states.
Okay.
And this could result in a patchwork of different regulations all over the country.
So some states might have strong worker protection.
Exactly.
And others might have very weak standards. So you could have workers in one state with a high level of safety protection.
Yeah.
But just across the border, workers are facing much bigger risks on the job.
That's a very real possibility.
Wow. Just because of where they live.
And it's not just about geographic differences. There's also the possibility of states enforcing regulations differently.
Okay.
Some might be stricter than others.
I see.
This could create an unfair situation for businesses.
Yeah.
And put workers in some states at a disadvantage.
That seems like it would cause a lot of confusion and inconsistency.
It could.
And in the end, wouldn't it undermine the whole point of protecting workers?
It definitely could.
And making workplaces safe and healthy.
Exactly.
And it wouldn't just affect individual workers, would it?
No, you're right.
It could also be a problem for businesses that operate in multiple states.
Absolutely.
They'd have to deal with all sorts of different regulations.
It would be a real headache.
Yeah, it could increase their administrative burden.
Definitely.
And potentially expose them to more liability. So getting rid of OSHA could have a ripple effect across the entire landscape of workplace safety, leading to a more fragmented and less effective system.
That's a major concern.
Right.
And it's something policymakers really need to think about as they weigh the pros and cons of the NOSHA Act. The potential impact on the well-being of American workers should be the top priority.
Well, we've covered a lot in our conversation today.
We have.
We've looked at the history of OSHA, the reasons it was created, the arguments for and against keeping it, the potential impact on the economy and the human cost. As we wrap things up, what are some key takeaways you think our listeners should remember as they follow this debate?
Well, the most important thing to keep in mind is that this isn't just some abstract policy debate. The decisions made about OSHA's future will have a real impact on millions of American workers.
Yes, absolutely.
We're talking about their health, their safety, their livelihoods. It's about making sure everyone has the right to a safe and healthy workplace. No matter where they live or what kind of work they do.
It's a reminder that these policy decisions in Washington, D.C. aren't just theoretical exercises.
Not at all.
They have real-world consequences that affect people's lives.
They do, and it's why it's so important to stay informed, to have thoughtful conversations about these issues, and to make your voice heard in the political process. These decisions ultimately affect all of us, and we need to be part of shaping the policies that will determine the future of workplace safety in this country.
This has been a really insightful look at a complex and important issue.
It has.
We've really dug into the history, the arguments, the data, and the potential consequences. As this debate continues, we encourage everyone to stay engaged, to keep learning,
Absolutely.
and to speak up. The future of workplace safety is a conversation we all need to be a part of.